All right, here we go with motivating students. As I alluded to in the last video, there is a lot of amazing research out there around motivating students. We're going to just take a look at one particular researcher, and then we're going to sort of pull it in around what does this look like in the classroom? Because that's ultimately always where we want to go with these ideas. So I just thought we'd start with a little cartoon. I selected Spanish, see if you can figure out how to withdraw your allowance, and motivating your kid to learn a second language. Not a bad way to motivate your child to learn a second language. Okay, so here we go. Exploring motivation. Basically, the definition of motivation is it is the drive to satisfy a need and the reason why people behave the way that they do. So why are people motivated? Why are you motivated to be at school? Or why are you motivated to say, no, I'm going to work. No, I'm going to procrastinate, or no, I'm going to get on those videos and watch all those videos right now and stay ahead, right? That was a little subliminal thing there. Okay. So it's the reason why people behave they do. Basically, motivated behavior is energized, directed, and sustained. So when you think about something you're really motivated to do, time goes by like that, right? It goes quickly. So that's kind of where we want our kids in our classrooms to be. We want them to be energized, directed, and sustained. Your own motivations will shape your teaching. So if you are super motivated to do a unit on Greek mythology, because you love Greek mythology, that will shape your teaching, and you will be amazing at that particular unit. And identifying students' motivations and shaping those motivations ultimately will be central to their education, because the quicker that you can figure out what motivates kids, the quicker you can get at that, and then the learning, they'll just be so much more engaged in their learning. Okay, let's look at achievement motivation. So we have, you probably heard these terms before. These are pretty common terms: extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Basically, extrinsic motivation is, I'm going to use my little pencil here. Extrinsic motivation, woohoo, is something from the outside. So you get some kind of a reward, you get honors in your high school. There's something from outside of yourself. You do something to obtain something else. So again, my sister-in-law, who worked at Johnson & Johnson, worked really hard, got lots of external rewards like going on trips and things. And so you are doing something to obtain something else, and you're influenced absolutely by rewards and punishments. Okay, intrinsic motivation is your interior. So you're demonstrating self-determination by doing something for its own sake. So it's all about that you feel that this is the right thing to do, or the good thing to do, or you're just totally motivated to do it. Even though it's a little bit above and beyond what you're expected to do, you're really into it. And increased motivation when they are given some personal choice. So think about if you gave all of your students some personal choice to do an assignment, how much more motivated they are than just saying, okay, everybody has to write about a squirrel, when half your class doesn't really care about squirrels. Okay, so there we go. So that's extrinsic, intrinsic. Let's talk a little bit about attribution theory. This is, I think, really, really interesting. And this is our friend Bernard Weiner. He is a professor at the University of California, and he put forth this theory, and it has been tossed around by lots of other theorists, but he's kind of the main dude behind it. So basically, when you're talking about attribution theory, attribution is there's an inference made about the causes behind an event or a behavior. So you're trying to figure out what are the causes behind the behavior. So to get us going, I'm just going to read you a little bit of an example of what attribution theory is. So two people are in a race, and one of them wins. Did that individual win because he or she was a faster runner, or because the other person was having an off day? The answer depends on which runner you ask. The winner will attribute the victory to his or her ability, and feel confident about the next race. The loser will blame the loss on circumstances beyond his or her control, things like it was raining, I didn't feel very well, I had a poor night's sleep, and be less likely to race again unless those factors change. Okay, a person's motivation to attempt a task is directly related to his or her confidence in a positive outcome. If people believe they will be unsuccessful, they are less likely to try, and if they do, it is doubtful they will give 100% of their effort. So it comes down to, okay, number 2, what you attribute your success or failure to will then determine the amount of effort or motivation that you will expend on the task. Just change the THE to a that. So if you believe that you are going to be successful, then you will probably do the task again. If you believe you're going to be unsuccessful, you probably are not that interested in trying that particular task again. Okay, so again, Bernard Weiner's attribution theory. Basically, people will interpret their environment in such a way as to maintain a positive self-image. So instead of, if you lose a race, it's harder to say, yeah, I didn't train very well, or I'm just actually not really fast. It's easier to blame something else, something like the weather, something like, oh, my shoes, I had a rock in my shoe, because you sort of save face. So it's a natural human reaction to always sort of attribute your unsuccessful attempt on something else versus saying that was my unsuccessful attempt at this was because I'm just not smart enough, I'm not fast enough, I just didn't train enough. That's harder to say, but it's easier to say, oh yeah, it was raining, I had a rock in my shoe. Okay, so we always will, this is number 4, assumption that people will interpret their environment to maintain a positive self-image. So think about that when you're in a classroom with kids. They are always going to try to maintain their positive self-image in there. Okay, let's go on to the specifics of attribution theory. Basically, you have 3 aspects of the attribution theory. So locus of control. The locus of control, when one succeeds, one attributes successes internally. So like my skill, my effort. And when somebody else succeeds, like say in this race situation, one tends to credit external. So the rain, the rock in the shoe. This again is because we want to save face. So internal, usually we take the credit when we're successful. External, usually when we're unsuccessful, we blame external issues. Stability, the extent to which the cause. Oh, actually, I'll give you one more. I'm going to go back to locus of control. So this is one example. Maria's car breaks down on the freeway. If she believes the breakdown happened because of her ignorance about cars, like, oh, I didn't change the oil, I should have changed my fan belt before this, she's making an internal attribution, so it's her issue. If she believes that the breakdown happened because her car is old, she's making an external attribution. Okay, starting to make sense? Now let's go on to stability. So when people make a stable attribution, they infer that an event or behavior is due to stable, unchanging factors. When they make an unstable attribution, they infer that an event or behavior is due to unstable, temporary factors. Okay, so let's give you an example, because usually these examples help to clarify. Basically, Lee gets a D on his sociology term paper. Don't be Lee. If he attributes the grade to the fact that he always has bad luck with sociology papers, he's making a stable attribution because he's saying this is always the way it is. It's stable. If he attributes the grade to the fact that he just didn't have that much time to study that week, he's making an unstable attribution. So it's just that particular time. He's like, yeah, I just didn't have enough time. But that's not it's not permanent, then that's an unstable. So unstable is not necessarily negative. It's just something that is not sort of an all the time issue. Okay, and controllability. So this is the extent to which the individual can control external and internal factors. So for example, when student perceives that they are prevented from succeeding because of external factors that other people have controlled, this often makes them angry and frustrated. So say for example, you're writing a test and suddenly they're jackhammering on the roof above you and it's very distracting and very loud. That's an external. You can't control that. And you will then become angry, frustrated, and fairly legitimately so. So that's controllability. Externally, you can't. There's usually very too few times that you can actually control that. And then the other one, when students perceive that they have not done well because of internally controlled cases, such as not making enough effort, or you just believe that you have low ability, that you're just not smart enough to do it, then that often is attributed to then feelings of guilt and shame and humiliation and embarrassment, because it's something that you can internally control, but it's still not hitting the mark of what you need to do. Okay, again, if you want to just take a minute, it's really a cool theory. It just takes a little bit to get your head around. Think about your reading. I gave you a little video on this as well. So just take a pause if you need to, but if you feel like you got it, keep on going. Okay, so let's look at some of these combinations here. So we have, let's look particularly at low aptitude. So I'm going to look at this one. So this is internal, because aptitude is internal here. It's stable because generally your aptitude doesn't change from week to week. Your cognitive ability to understand things basically kind of stays the same. And it's uncontrollable. So if you say that you can't do anything about your low aptitude, you would feel that it's out of your realm. So this is a reason one student may give for failure. Yeah, I'm just not smart enough. So these are the reasons, particular reasons, why a student will say that it's internal, it's stable, it's uncontrollable. They feel that they have no way to become successful in that particular schooling situation. Okay, let's look at did not study for this particular test, this one here. Okay, so again, it's internal because you didn't study for the test. This one's unstable because you just didn't study for this particular test, and it's controllable. Oops. You could actually, it's controllable. So you're like, yeah, I just didn't study for this particular test. I'll study in the future. So it's a controllable aspect. Okay. And then let's look at the instructor is biased. Okay. So starting to get the hang of it. This is external. This is external. This is stable because you're feeling like the instructor is biased all the time. But this is the interesting one. It's controllable because you could change your opinion about the instructor if you went and talked to the instructor, those kind of things. So that's why that's controllable. That one's a little bit tricky because you kind of would think, well, it's uncontrollable, but you could actually change your opinion of the instructor. Okay, so I just think this is super interesting, especially as we're talking about students. And so you have a student that says, yeah, I just am not smart enough. You kind of have to know where the root of that is. Or, yeah, you just hate me. Or my other teachers all hate me, so that's why I don't do very well. You have to kind of know where that's coming from and then how to work through that with the student so that they see that they are more in control than they think they are. Okay, so for our collaborate time, I want you to think of some of the reasons that you've given, either for successful situation or unsuccessful situation, and then you're going to, with a partner or a couple people, is you're just going to work through a bit of analysis of what does that excuse mean. So be ready with a couple of your own successes and failures and what you've said about them, and yeah. I think that will be fun to work through that. Okay, let's now look. This is another Shunk and Zimmerman are another couple of researchers that have specifically taken Weiner's attribution theory and plunked it in particularly into a school situation. So basically here, they're saying that there are competence beliefs. So a student sorry, I'll just read this. Your perception if you have what it takes to learn the material. So this is your belief in your own actual academic, cognitive, emotional competence. So if you say, I'm very sure that I can solve these math problems, you have a high competence belief. So you're like, yeah, I can do this. Control belief, your perception of the odds of you accomplishing the task under certain conditions. So you might say, if I study the material diligently, I know I can perform well on the timed test. So this is, again, control. You know that you're competent. Now it depends on what you actually do. So if you actually study, you will do well. You know that if you don't study, then you probably won't do well. For us as teachers, we need to know if they perceive a lack in competence or control. Do our kids actually, if they really feel like they cannot do the work, that they are not competent academically, cognitively to do the work, how we motivate them will look different than if it's just if it's a control belief. So if they just went, yeah, you know what, I went camping on the weekend and I just didn't have time to do this work. So I know I can do this, but I just didn't do it this time. However, I just think this is so interesting. Students who do not feel competent, they do not feel like they are smart enough or have the cognitive ability, usually do not experience academic success, right? So think about school for a kid who feels like they're dumb. It's rough. It's a rough time. So they fail by not trying or by misbehaving to get out of the class, to get out of showing their peers or their teachers that they actually don't understand and that they cannot understand. So remember that back to Weiner's idea of we will preserve our own self. This is what kids are doing. So oftentimes when you have a child that is just like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, and all your coaxing and all your bribery is not changing that child's willingness to try, it's because they probably actually don't feel competent. And they have found that, I'm going to go to the first bullet point here, it is easier and psychologically protective to just not try at all than to continue to try and fail. No amount of control over external influences like you get to choose or punishment or bribery will override the need to self-protect. So if they feel that they are not going to be successful, they will either just stop, they'll just fail by not trying, because that at least then they could say, well, I just didn't do the work, so that's why I failed. But it never then really shows the true, the deep-seated idea that they don't feel competent. Or they misbehave so that they get booted out of class, so then they don't actually ever have to show that they don't understand. So these students need low risk, high success tasks, relevant to them. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about this. My husband is a teacher as well, and he was teaching grade 6 and 7 in British Columbia. And he had a young man who he just stopped trying because school just was not his thing. However, his dad was a welder, and he was a really amazing welder for 12 years of age. And so my husband contacted his dad, knowing that this kid needed something positive in a school setting, So my husband contacted his dad, and his dad brought his welder in, and they brought all the equipment and all the protective stuff. And this young man got to show off his skill as a welder to his classmates in a school situation. Now, this kid didn't turn around and become like, complete scholar, but he was at least willing then to try because he had a low risk, high success task. He was good at welding. He got to show off his welding skills. Then it was like, okay, I'm not as incompetent as I thought. So think about that. So again, in collaborate time, I want you to think of a fellow student or a friend of yours, or it could be you, that just didn't feel competent in school. And what was their motivation like? Did they like school? So just jot down a few things for a collaborate time about that, because this again is an issue in school. Okay. What impacts motivation for students? Of course, the students themselves. So you cannot push anyone up the ladder unless he's willing to climb himself. So those students, they have to put some effort in too. You can't just be the one that's always pushing. However, you as a teacher are responsible for doing your best to motivate those kids. So Mark Twain, the really great make you feel that you too can become great. So that's where you take all your knowledge about attribution theory, about competence, beliefs, and you go, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what makes this kid tick, what motivates this kid. And finally, your content, what the mind of man conceives and he believes he can achieve. This is about bringing in content like my husband did with this young man in welding, content that inspires and is exciting to these students and ultimately motivates them to learn. That's the ultimate. Awesome. Hope you enjoyed this. We will see you in collaborate time.